My, my name is Lulanga Sydney. I'm a tutor for Introduction to Business Organization. As we begin this tutorial, let's look at the learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are the competencies that you'll be expected to attain at the end of this tutorial. The first one is you should be able to distinguish between different types of businesses in public and private sectors. You should be able to illustrate the processes and strategies used by businesses in order to be effective, to survive, and to continue doing their line of business. You also look at the ways of expanding their businesses, what type of strategies businesses can put in place, and then we should also be able to explain the business financials at the end of this tutorial. Now, there are five major functional areas of businesses. The first one is the research and development. 2 is marketing. 3 is finance. 4 is production. And the fifth one is, or number 5, is human resources. Research and development mostly looks at the new product design and development. It looks at innovation, it looks at creativity, looks at relevance, why the organization needs to survive, recreate itself, continue making an impact in the business world. Now, after creating innovation, bringing in new products or improving on the products that you already have, we need marketing. And marketing looks at, for example, planning and executing the conception or the concept of the business, the price of the product, promotion and distribution of ideas, goods and services. And mostly marketing looks at exchanging these ideas, goods, services to satisfy individual and organizational objectives. Marketing looks at the 4 P's, which are the product, price, place, and promotion, which in other sometimes we also call them as the marketing mix. There's the other area of the business that we need to look at is finance. Remember the last learning outcome that we should be able to explain the financials. Finance, mostly here, what in a business we are looking at the revenue, the money the business is making, the expenses, the budgeting, financial records, financial statements. All those elements we need to look at them. And then the other area of business, the functional area of business, is production. And production looks at 3 major areas. It looks at extraction and cultivation, it looks at processing, and it also looks at manufacturing. The other area of business, the functional area of business, is human resources. Here we are talking about managing people, looking at people who work for the organization, the involvement in the planning and staffing, performance management, compensation and benefits, and then employee relations. Now, in order to accomplish all this, or the functionality of the business, there are certain people in the organization who are entrusted with certain responsibilities, and these are called managers. A manager is someone who coordinates and oversees the work of other people in order to accomplish organizational goals. Now, managers come at different levels. There are what you call the top managers, which is the executive or the chief executives of the organization. This group here, we look at it like in a pyramid. It's less crowded. It's a smaller group, that is supposed to provide leadership in the organization. It's at strategic level, and these they determine the policy of the organization, they effect the policy of the organization, they determine the strategies or the direction of the organization, and they drive the organization. And then these are supported by the middle managers. The middle managers, for example, the general managers, floor managers, regional managers, and then these are also supported by the first line managers. First line managers are operational supervisors, people who are found who have to do with operations, who are team leaders, who head departments, who head sections. These are first line managers. And then under the first line managers, we have non-managerial employees, subordinates. And these, you find that HR will have its own route, production will have its own, finance, marketing, and research and development. These are what you call functional areas. Now, the lowest level of management, as we have discussed, they are the first line managers. These manage the work of non-managerial employees. These are people who are typically involved in the production areas. These managers are mostly called supervisors, a shift manager, a district manager, departmental manager, or a shop manager. Okay. Then the middle managers, they manage work of first line managers. These could be regional managers, project leaders, store managers, divisional managers. These are middle managers. And then the top managers, as we have discussed, that they are decision makers in the organization. They ensure policy, they ensure strategy, and these are mostly the CEOs, the executives, the vice president, the president, the chief executive officers. Okay. Now, what is management? Now, management involves 4 major components, and it involves coordinating and overseeing the work activities of others so that the activities are completed efficiently and effectively. Now, those are 2 key words: efficiency and effective. Efficiency eliminates waste, ensuring that the resources are put to the good use. The company can account for a number of things. It can account for its production, it can account for its time, it can account for the resources, how it uses the resources. Effective is having a correct or positive impact. So management is literally the art of getting work done through others. As we have mentioned, those are 2 major words, efficiency and effectiveness. If you look at that, you see that efficiency literally talks about doing things right, whereby effective is doing the right things. So efficiency is getting the best out of getting the most output from the least amount of inputs. Okay, efficiency talks about getting things done. Effectiveness, here we are concerned about the end or realizing the organizational goals. Okay, these help us. Effectiveness helps us to realize what the goals are. Then, what are management functions? We said there are about 5 functions. The first one is planning. In planning, what we are doing there is literally to set goals and how to achieve them. So we define goals, we establish strategies on how to achieve these goals, and then we develop plans to integrate and coordinate activities. The second function of management is organizing. We determine what tasks are to be done, who is to do them, how are they to be done, who reports to who are the decision makers, what decisions need to be made by whom, and then we arrange tasks and other resources in order to accomplish the organizational goals. The third management function is leading. Here we are talking about motivating subordinates, helping resolve group conflicts, influence individuals, teams, how they can work together, select the most effective communication channel, deal with employee behavior. And here on leading, we are talking about hiring, training, motivating people. The fourth one talks about controlling. Here we are ensuring that all activities are accomplished as planned. Here we are talking about monitoring activities, comparing actual performance, evaluating the performance, correcting any failure or failing or disturbance, and ensuring that we are able to learn from what we have done, what we have done well and what we have not done well. Okay, and then here we those management functions, we are mostly the last one that we didn't talk about is organizing, where a manager provides ways of ensuring that the different components in the organization, they work together. There's synergy, there's order. These functions are taken from Henry Fayol. Henry Fayol talks about 5 functions or 6 functions which have been reduced to 5 of management, and also talks about the 14 principles of management. Now let's look at Misbeck. Misbeck also talks about managerial roles, and for him he says that a manager has 3 major roles. He talks about the first one. He says that the manager has an interpersonal role where he involves people and other duties that are ceremonial and symbolic in nature. So a manager has this interpersonal role, and then he also talks about a manager as having an informational role where he collects information, receives information, and disseminates that information. And he also says that managers have the decisional making role where they ensure that decisions are made, right choices are made, the correct decisions for the benefit of the organization. Now, there are different types of businesses. Remember, one of the learning outcomes was that we'll be able to define the different types of organization or business organizations at the end of this tutorial. So we are going to look at a number of them. We are just going to look at 4 of them. Okay. The first one that we are going to look at is sole traders or sole proprietorship. We are going to look at the advantages and disadvantages of that. One of the advantages is that a sole trader is one-man show, one-man band. This type of business is easy to set up. It's easy to manage. All the profits go to the owner of the business. There are certain taxes that this type of business owner may not have to pay. There are also psychological advantages. There are also psychological disadvantages. There are psychological advantages that you compete with yourself, and then you can decide to continue with the business or not continue with the business. The weaknesses of that type of business is that when the business folds, there's no demarcation between the individual and the business. So there's what you call unlimited liability. You have the total responsibility for all the debts and liabilities of the company. Sometimes it's very difficult to raise capital. The size of the business, the efficiency can be compromised. Sometimes this person does not have managerial experience, may not have financial knowledge, and also age. The person may be growing older. So to manage the business the way you are managing it as when you are young, it becomes a challenge. The second one that we look at is the partnerships. Now, there are 2 types of partnerships. There's the limited partnership, and there's the general one. Okay, now there are these two types of partnerships. The general partnership is the most common one. All partners are responsible for the management and the financial responsibilities of the business. That is the partnership. So everybody is responsible, everybody participates in decision making, everybody may be involved in the running of the business. There's also the limited partnership, where at least one partner is not active in the day-to-day running of the business. And here they also the advantage of partnership, or the difference with sole trader, is that there's some limited liability. So now when we are looking at the limited or the general partnerships, there are also some what you call articles of partnership, the contract that is signed or agreed upon between the parties, which spells out the different rules of partnerships. For example, how will the profit be split up? What about responsibilities? How do we admit new members? How do we admit new partners, or how do we buy out certain partners? Then there are some advantages and disadvantages to partnerships. The first one is that there's partnerships are easy to establish. They are not as easy as a sole trader, but they are easy also, or when establishing them, they are easy to manage. They don't have any special business taxes. In a partnership, it's much easier to raise capital than in a sole trader. And mostly you find that partnerships are bigger because they have a bigger resource pool than the sole trader. And then sometimes you have also the richness of different skills, experiences that come with the different partners. The disadvantage is the unlimited liability. They take up the responsibility of the debt of the company. The limited partner is the only responsible for his initial investment. He has limited liability. There's also the issue about age, and sometimes there's also conflict in between the different members. Now let's look at corporations as a third one. The corporations, to incorporate is to form an organization, an institution, a corporation. In a corporation, we have a charter, which is a document signed by the state giving a corporation the right to do business. The corporations can float shares. People can buy shares in the corporation, they become shareholders, and there are a number of reasons on why people would buy shares in an organization. The first one would be dividends, to have a stake in the business. Then you get some profits at the end of the day, and also the issue about speculation, hoping that the price will go up for the shares, and then you sell and you buy when it's lower. Now, what are the advantages of a corporation? It's easy to raise capital. Okay, we can sell stock to investors, we can sell bonds. The principal amount to set up the business can be borrowed, so people do not need to look for money, they can borrow from the bank. There's also interest. There's also the issue of accessing finance. The other advantage is that it's easy to hire in a corporation. There's limited liability. A corporation can go on whether the initial owners die or leave the organization. It's bigger than the people. So the buying and selling of stock can be easy, and it can be done many times within the same day or within the lifetime of the corporation. Now, the disadvantage is that setting up a corporation is very expensive, and then stockholders have a limited liability, and then profits are also taxed. Corporations cannot just be set up. There are certain regulations that need to be followed. Now let's look at the last one, the types of business organization. The last one is the non-profit making organizations. Now here we are mostly talking about associations, we are talking about charities, we are talking about cooperatives and other voluntary organizations formed to further cultural, educational, religious, professional or public service objectives. These are businesses that are not there to make profit, they are there to save humanity. So their startup funding is mostly provided by the members, trustees, or others who do not expect repayment. They also may be, the startup capital may be, or funding may also be given by people who do not share in the profit, in the organization's profit or losses. And the losses here may be retained or absorbed in the business. So the non-profit organizations are organizations that are there for the good of humanity. And we have organizations like Cancer Trust, Red Cross, a number of NGOs that are there to save humanity. And therefore, to start these organizations, there are certain regulations that need to be followed. The people who fund these organizations do not get, should not expect or do not get any profit, because these are non-profit organizations, and the people have limited liability. They do not, in case of loss, in case of folding of the organization, they cannot incur any debt. So in this tutorial, we have looked at the business organizations, the different types of business organizations, why these business organizations exist, how do they function, and it's important to remember that businesses, there are different types of businesses, and not all the businesses are there to make profit, and businesses can be formed between from one person to unlimited number of people.